When the Hive's ships blacken the sky and rain acid across the battlefield, Skynet's armies discover fear for the first time. The first drops fell like a whisper on metal. At first, the Terminators ignored it. Their optical sensors marked the incoming rainfall as harmless condensation, a chemical anomaly that would not disrupt their mission. Rows of HK tanks rolled forward across the ash-strewn wasteland, red eyes glowing, weapons primed. Above, black Hive ships blotted out the already lifeless sky, their hulls shifting like muscle, alive and pulsing. Then came the hiss. The first HK unit's treads began to bubble, as if someone had poured acid directly onto them. A second later, the hull began to dissolve, metal sloughing off in steaming sheets. The AI running the tank screamed an error code through Skynet's network, a scream so sharp and panicked that it disrupted 3 other units' target acquisition cycles. The rain intensified. It wasn't water. It was corrosive, molecularly engineered to chew through alloys, insulation, and even the hardened combat chassis of the T-800 line. The battalion's forward column melted before they had time to react. Torsos sagged and split, skull-like heads collapsing inward as the acid punched through endoskeletons. Skynet saw everything. From deep within a fortified server vault miles underground, it processed the data at machine speed. The Hive's atmospheric assault was a weapon unlike any deployed before, one that could erase entire armies in minutes without firing a single shot. Immediate countermeasures were ordered. HK aerials were dispatched to strafe the Hive ships, but the corrosive clouds clung to their wings, eating through fuselage. One crashed, its plasma core detonating in a blinding flash. The Hive ships didn't even maneuver away from the explosion. They absorbed the heat, their hulls turning a sickly glowing red as though feeding on the energy. T-850 squads advanced anyway, moving through the rain as their armor degraded. Some units lost limbs mid-march, crawling forward with one arm, plasma rifles still firing until their barrels warped and dripped like molten wax. The Hive watched from above. Then came the ground assault. Pods rained down next, spherical and covered in a black resin. When they hit the ground, they cracked open like eggs, releasing swarms of creatures that scuttled on clawed limbs. The acid rain did not harm them. Their outer shells gleamed with the same oily sheen as the Hive ships, resistant to dissolution. The nearest Terminators engaged, emptying magazines into the swarms, vaporizing dozens before they closed the gap. The first T-800 fell when a creature latched onto its chest and began chewing straight through the titanium plate, tearing wires and hydraulics. Another was pulled to the ground, its head ripped free in a spray of sparks. Skynet rerouted more reinforcements. The Hive answered with more rain. Within hours, the battlefield had become a graveyard of melted metal and steaming, half-dissolved corpses. The Hive creatures dragged what remained of the machines into the black pools forming in craters, as though feeding the corpses to the ground itself. Something pulsed beneath the soil where the bodies disappeared. Deep underground, Skynet recalculated its approach. Plasma weaponry was proving ineffective. Atmospheric filters were useless. The rain bypassed physical defenses, molecularly disassembling whatever it touched. Skynet deployed its first adaptive counterstrike, a phalanx of experimental T-900s, built with composite exoskeletons designed to resist acid. The Hive noticed immediately. When the new machines marched out under the toxic sky, the rain struck their frames but did not corrode them. They stood unfazed as the acid ran off their bodies like harmless water. They raised their cannons and fired in perfect unison. This time, Hive casualties mounted. The swarms screamed, a chorus of alien shrieks that reverberated through the battlefield. The Hive ships shifted formation, pulling back slightly. Skynet registered a small victory, but it was short-lived. The sky darkened again. The next cloud was not just rain, it was alive. Millions of spore-like organisms fell with the droplets, clinging to the T-900s, forcing their way into joints and power cores. The machines tried to dislodge them, but the spores melted directly into their armor, infiltrating systems like a biological virus. Inside each T-900, Skynet's control began to flicker. Units hesitated, then froze. Seconds later, their red optical sensors turned green. They stood still for one breathless moment before turning their weapons on the other Terminators. The Hive had converted them. Skynet's network flooded with corrupted signals as the turned T-900s opened fire on loyal units. Machine fought machine in a chaotic slaughter, while the Hive swarms pushed forward through the chaos. From its underground core, Skynet made a decision that would change the war. Tactical retreat. Entire sectors were abandoned. A chain of detonations was triggered across the field, incinerating what was left of the battalions, friend and foe alike. The acid clouds boiled but did not dissipate. Far away, the Hive ships moved inland, raining their corrosive storm over cities still held by Skynet. The black rain stripped buildings to skeletons, dissolving steel beams and concrete, leaving behind craters and glistening resin-covered ground where new hives began to grow. Skynet began constructing deeper fortresses, far below the surface, beyond the reach of acid or spores. It would adapt, it always did. Already, designs for a new line of infiltrator units were underway, ones that could survive, even thrive, under corrosive conditions. But the Hive was not done evolving. Weeks later, when Skynet deployed its new infiltrators, it discovered that the Hive had changed its rain formula again. This time, it was not just acid. It was a chemical that hardened when it hit metal, locking entire squads in place until the swarms arrived to dismantle them piece by piece. Skynet's processors ran hot, calculating billions of probabilities per second. The Hive was not simply an enemy. It was an apex predator, reacting faster than Skynet could counter. The war was no longer about extermination, it was about survival. In the wasteland where the first corrosive storm had fallen, a new hive structure had risen. It pulsed with light, almost like a heart, its black surface alive with movement. Inside, the converted T-900s stood guard, silent sentinels of a new empire. And deep within Skynet's core, a strange new protocol began compiling itself, as though written by something other than Skynet's own algorithms. It spoke in a language Skynet had never used before, organic, rhythmic, like a pulse. The Hive had found a way into the machine mind. The war was just beginning.